Modern neuroscience tells us that instead of writing down things we're thankful for in a journal, simply listening to and connecting with positive stories about people can better help shift our immune system into balance. It can help us move from a state of constant anxiety towards motivation. So 3 days a week, I'm sharing stories we can feel good about. Mondays, you'll hear a story from the past to be thankful for. On Wednesdays, I'll tell an inspiring story from the present. And Fridays, you'll head into the weekend with a story to keep you optimistic about our future. Hi, I'm Chris. Welcome to My Good 3. All right, happy Wednesday. There's something about trail hiking that helps some people come alive. Maybe it's the methodical bipedal rhythm that helps activate something in our brains to rejuvenate us. Or maybe it's something more mystical, like a hidden energy floating through the trees. Regardless, hiking is an activity that people of all ages enjoy. And every year, thousands of people on the East Coast of the United States attempt to reconnect with nature and push their physical and mental limits by through hiking the Appalachian Trail. This impressive feat, which takes between 5 and 7 months, is a winding 2,200-mile journey along the Appalachian Mountains of the eastern U.S. across 14 states from Maine to Georgia. However, when stories from the AT, as the trail is called, make it into the mainstream, they're often based in tragedy. It's usually either a medical emergency, a fatal accident, or an assault that makes it into the local news. Or even worse, the occasional homicide that generates national interest. Unfortunately, what most people don't hear are all the inspiring stories. With this year's Appalachian Trail season coming to a close, and most through hikers recently completing their treks, it's a good opportunity to visit a few of the incredible things that happen when people look out for one another's well-being. A human connection they all refer to as trail magic. A man in his 20s, originally from Maine, described a moment during his first few weeks on his hike, starting in Georgia, that opened his eyes to the kindness along the trail. He was in the mountains of North Georgia when an unseasonable spring cold front pushed through, and the weather dipped to near zero. He woke up one morning and couldn't feel his feet, but he put his boots on and got moving. He knew he needed to get to the next rest point, a small lean-to 20 miles north along the trail, before temperatures dipped again. That day, his entire hike was spent dreading another night in temperatures he hadn't quite prepared for. When he finally arrived at the lean-to, he stood speechless after finding 2 down comforters brought to the lean-to by a local, knowing that anyone staying in the lean-to that night would need the extra warmth. The kindness brought him to tears. A woman in her 30s was attempting a solo through hike. Along the route, her husband and kids would meet her in many of the towns to give her encouragement, load her up with food and water, and provide a warm place to sleep. At one point, she was hiking a section in Virginia that didn't have easy access to fresh water, and with the temperatures soaring that week, she had run out. Her energy was running low and she was overheating. She looked at her map and found that the nearest water supply was a quarter-mile hike down a steep hill. It would take her nearly half the day just to get down there and back, and who knows how much energy she'd have to expend. She was running out of motivation to keep going. Still, she kept moving forward, and as she rounded a bend, she saw a man wearing a Virginia Tech hat, holding fresh water containers, smiling from ear to ear. She sat down and learned his name was Bill. This used to be his land before he lost 13 acres of it to eminent domain for the trail system. But he wasn't bitter. Instead, he was a fixture on the trail for hikers in need of water in the warm months. Each day, he would cart clean water all the way up from his property to a small shelter next to the trail. He'd sit with them and talk and make sure everyone was hydrated. Her mindset changed that day. She could do it. Trail magic was real. There's another story of a man in his late 60s who decided, after years of being a plastic surgeon, that he was burnt out and needed a break. He'd been an Eagle Scout when he was young and missed time in the outdoors, so he looked to the Appalachian Trail as his answer. He would attempt a solo hike to reconnect with nature and restore his energy. At one point, heading south through Pennsylvania, he encountered 2 days of cold, steady rain. His rain gear was overwhelmed, and the trail became a river, making it incredibly difficult for him to make progress. As the weather worsened, he became colder and colder, until at one point, with his feet and body immersed in cold water for an extended period, he recognized that he was becoming hypothermic. He was now in a dangerous situation. He sat down and attempted to open his pack so he could change into some dry clothes, but his hands wouldn't work. He was now shaking uncontrollably and couldn't move. The rain continued to blanket him as he leaned back and his mind started to drift. He realized he was in a life-threatening situation. Out of nowhere, a stranger arrived, a man half his age. He said he was an Army veteran and he had medical training. Immediately, he opened the older man's pack and helped him dry off. He fed him the food he had and made a pot of hot coffee to warm the struggling man from the inside. He then helped the man up and got him safely to the nearest shelter and tended to him until he knew he was going to be all right. I think what we hear about the Appalachian Trail runs parallel to the way things are in our world these days. We hear a lot of negatives. A lot of stories are sensationalized and cherry-picked to get the most attention. So we inadvertently focus on the dangers and we hesitate to trust those we don't know very well in order to protect ourselves. The problem is this sets us up to miss the connections that make being human so unique. I know I'm guilty of this. As we begin the new year, it's a good opportunity to make sure that we're still okay with depending on one another, even strangers, because ultimately we're wired for that. While it may feel uncomfortable, we have to trust that it's healthy for us to open ourselves up to a little trail magic. Thank you for listening. I realize this podcast won't be successful without your help. So if you'd like to rate it, or better yet, review it, wherever you get your podcasts, that would really help. And if you're on Instagram, go to @mygood3, THREE, to vote each episode up or down. I'm also excited to read more Good 3 stories from listeners. So just go to our website, mygood3.com, and submit a story of your own from the past, present, or future, or all three. And maybe I'll use it in an episode. Thanks again. Here's to hoping My Good 3 can set the stage for your good week.